Today we're going to talk about what politics is and why do people hate that concept? Why do people hate talking about it or things like that? People often use the word politics to talk about who runs the country and how. But politics actually covers the way people make decisions and about how to work together in all kinds of groups, big or small. It's like we see on the news constantly, this hatred towards one another, and we think it's because of each other's politics. But in reality, our opinions aren't so far off. People make decisions in economics and in government, and it shows how we work together to make things better or worse for some people. So here's an example of a small-ish group, and it's a sports team. They all have common goals, like let's win a match and let's get in shape and let's have fun. But not everybody agrees on how to achieve these goals. Here's some examples. We should train 5 times a week. You have that overachiever who wants to train every single day, and then no way, I have too much stuff to do, or let's have my dad help coach, or no, let's get somebody who's famous to coach instead. So most groups have a way of organizing themselves so decisions can get made in the same way each time. For example, they could say that the team captain makes all the group decisions about organizing the team. And then this is called a political system. But sometimes people in groups will not want to change the system. I want to keep being the captain. No, it's my turn. Why do we have to have a captain anyway? That's also politics. It's how we sit there and argue and discuss to see what is the best way. Groups can be described, in this way. They can be described as societies. In societies, not everyone can get their way they want all the time. They just have to have the system that can make the decisions to get along, and that's why politics is so useful. So you can see that politics is everywhere. When you look at education, foreign policy, work, healthcare, environment, war, all these different things, and we're going to have an activity in class where we're going to look and do a little bit of research about why these opinions are so close but just so far away. Meaning like when you look at things like healthcare, should we have universal health care? Who should pay for doctors in hospitals? Should going to a dentist be free? Who should take care of the elderly? Or is it best to tackle poverty first and healthcare second? What are those things that we're going to look at that are so divisive, but we have to come up with a decision, and the decision has to be the plurality or the most of the group agrees on. The next thing we have to say is a political question of who's in charge. And who's in charge is one of the biggest political questions in large societies. The answer is important because whoever's in charge gets to tell everyone else what to do. You don't always have to do what someone else tells you to, but it's hard to say no to people who have the power or authority. A person with power can force you to do anything or do things by making you scared. So here's an example is, give me your money. Why should I? Well, if you don't, I'm going to beat you up. Oh, I guess I have to. So, think about that. But then there's the other idea. A person with authority doesn't always have to force you through threats. Usually because you're part of a bigger group and that you've already, as a group, decided that you could do something else or you're going to do something. So, for instance, give me your money. Why should I? Because the whole class agreed to collect money for the school charity. Oh, I forgot. Okay, pay up. Okay, fair enough. So, who has authority? In a fair society, the people in charge need to have the authority, not just power. The political system will only work if most people agree that those that are in charge are allowed to tell everyone what to do. Think about all the people who might tell you what you'd have to do on a daily basis. How many of those people actually have the authority? And what do you think? So, for instance, do your parents have the authority to tell you to eat your dinner? Does the government have the authority to tell you to pay your taxes? Does the team captain have the ability to say, pass me the ball, or have the authority to say, pass me the ball? Does somebody on Facebook or Instagram say, like my status? Or does the principal tell you to slow down in the hall? In Montauk, we have different policies, and these come from authorities. And we'll talk specifically about the cell phone. So I want to tell you a little bit more about how Montauk as a school represents politics and structures of the government. So here you have the school board. Okay, these are elected officials that are coming from our community, meaning your parents or people who are 18 and above have the ability to vote in and out school board members. So there's 9 of them on the board. What these people do is they make policies to help the district. But what they also do is they employ somebody called a superintendent. So this is Dr. Sean Arney, who is our superintendent. So the school board listens to Dr. Arney's educational opinion, and they come up with policies to enforce. They come up with rules that fit the norm of the community based off of the recommendations of the community. Dr. Arney then comes up with procedures for how to make those rules be used in school for the best ability for students. So what he does is he employs a team of administrators. And I have Mr. Fox there in the middle because Mr. Fox is slightly below Dr. Arney in the school board, meaning he has the ability to make changes, but not as much power and authority as Dr. Arney. So he goes through and makes suggestions with his administrative team, so you'd have Mrs. Schnell and all those things, all the other administrators who are there. So for instance, with the cell phone policy, somebody here probably made a decision that said, cell phones should either be allowed or not be allowed. And then the school board comes up with a written policy that says this is the policy for cell phones. So it takes a team to come up with that. And then you have this angel here, which is obviously me. And then I am told, because my boss and my boss's boss told me that we have to go through and enforce the cell phone policy, meaning that what happens if you guys break the rules, I get in trouble. So these guys are his boss, he's his boss, or vice versa, and then I have to listen to all of them as bosses. I have direct contact with Mr. Fox or Dr. Arney in that way. And what happens is after that, I come to you and say, you guys cannot have cell phones. So you look at me like that because you're very mad. But this is the hierarchy of how this government works and how the structure of politics works. So in order for you to make positive changes, what will happen is you, down there, have to have your parents come in or vote for different people to create different policies if you're not happy with the status quo. And that's what a government does. If we're not happy with how things are, we vote for new people and we change the policies and procedures. So Montauk is an example of a working government with politics, the final say in how society runs. So what is a government? It's a big society in such a country. The answer is the question, who's in charge? It's usually the government. The government can be a single person or a group of people, but it nearly always has the final say in the decisions about how society is run. But all governments are different. Until the 1700s, France was ruled by a king, and people believed that the king's authority came from God. I'm in charge because God says so. In the Middle Ages, towns in Siena in Italy was ruled by a council of business people, which changed every 2 months. They were rich and they had the influence, but they came together as a team or a council. In ancient Sparta, there were 2 different kings with 2 different royal families. And what they thought was working together. 2 heads are better than 1. In our democracy, it's where you have popular vote, meaning popular consent of the people, where obviously this is going to be different because the person who wins the most votes typically is going to be the person who's in charge. We'll talk about this because the United States is very unique in the fact that we have something called an electoral college, where 4 times in history the person who had 1 more votes, 1 more people, has actually not won the presidency. But we'll get through that through later on discussions. So where does the government's authority come from? The people in government need to have authority if they're going to tell everyone what to do, and trust the people will accept it. But where does the government's authority come from? It could come from tradition, or higher authority, popular content, or possibly it's a choice based on wisdom. So in tradition, the tradition idea is, our families have been ruling for centuries. My mother was queen, so now I am, and our ancestors founded this city. So things that have been there, they're rooted in the society, and there's no reason to change until something happens. Popularity is, we have elections every 5 years to choose a new government. Winning the most votes gives us authority, and we have to persuade voters to choose us, meaning that if we don't like what's happening, we vote for somebody else. You come from a higher authority, and look at this from a tradition where the pharaoh is viewed as the same person as a god, or the king is God's representative on earth. You find that more in older societies or in dictatorships where they feel that somebody else gave them authority and nobody else should be able to take it away. And finally, wisdoms. Philosophers should be kings. They know what's best, and they're the cleverest people. They should be in the government. We need the best and the brightest taking the charge. So if a government is claiming to have authority, it needs to have a good reason, and that reason needs to be accepted by most, if not all, of the people in society. Government with both those things is known as a legitimate government. Sometimes, though, people don't accept that the current government is legitimate and want to change. They might protest or demand reforms or start a revolution, which could lead to a new government. Now, we'll talk about that later on as we get through the sections. Where is this happening at in the world today? Has this happened in the United States, or is it still happening in the United States, where we challenge what the authority is or the structure, and how do those things kind of come back to look at us? So again, in this section, we just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a background of what politics is and why people hate that concept. But it's not all bad. It's how we do everything on a daily basis. We kind of are political beings. We kind of negotiate. We look and we discuss and we come up with the best decisions that's going to help the most people do the most good.